If you need people's approval to feel worthy, then your confidence is on rent. One bad comment, one rejection, one moment of silence, and suddenly you feel small again. Listen to me, the world is not your judge, and you were never meant to live on permission. The moment you stop begging for validation is the moment you start owning your life. Because real power doesn't come from being liked. It comes from knowing who you are, even when nobody claps for you. Most people think validation is a reward, but in reality, it's a trap. The moment you start needing other people's approval to feel good about yourself, you hand over the steering wheel of your life. You stop living by your own standards and start living by their reactions. Think about it. When your mood depends on what someone else thinks, you are no longer in control. You're waiting for permission to feel confident, waiting for permission to feel successful, waiting for permission to feel worthy. And that's a dangerous place to live because people's opinions change like the weather. One day they clap for you, the next day they question you. If your self-worth is built on applause, it will collapse the moment the room goes quiet. Validation feels good in the short term, but it weakens you in the long term. It trains your brain to look outside instead of inside. You start asking, do they like me? Instead of asking, do I respect myself? You start choosing actions based on how they will be judged instead of how they align with who you really are. That's how people end up stuck in careers they hate, relationships that drain them, and lives that don't fit their soul. Not because they're incapable, but because they're addicted to approval. And every addiction comes with a price. The price of validation is your authenticity. The price of validation is your courage. The price of validation is your freedom. Here's the truth most people avoid. If you live for other people's approval, you will die with their limitations. You will shrink your dreams to fit their comfort. You will silence your voice to avoid their criticism. You will postpone your greatness because you're afraid of their judgment. But growth doesn't ask for permission. Change doesn't wait for consensus. The strongest people in the world are not the ones who are liked by everyone. They are the ones who are loyal to their values even when it's unpopular. They don't wake up asking, will they accept me? They wake up asking, am I becoming the person I was meant to be? When you chase validation, you become reactive. When you stop chasing it, you become powerful. You move from needing agreement to standing in truth. You move from seeking applause to creating impact. And the irony is this, the moment you stop begging for validation, you often receive more respect. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped trying to be liked and started trying to be real. Real confidence doesn't come from being approved by the crowd. It comes from being aligned with yourself. And when you build your life on that foundation, no rejection can shake you, no criticism can define you, and no opinion can control you, because you no longer need permission to be who you are. Your worth was never meant to be decided by the outside world. It was never supposed to rise and fall with compliments, likes, or applause. The problem is, from a young age, we are trained to look outward for proof that we matter. We're praised when we perform, criticized when we fail, and slowly we start believing that our value depends on how well we please others. Over time, that belief becomes a habit, and that habit becomes an identity. We forget that worth is not something you earn, it is something you recognize. The moment you tie your value to external results, you put your self-respect on a roller coaster. One good comment lifts you up, one negative opinion tears you down. That's not confidence. That's emotional dependency. Real confidence is internal. It comes from knowing your principles, honoring your word, and standing by what you believe, even when no one is watching. It's built when you do what you said you would do, when you face fear instead of running from it, and when you tell yourself the truth instead of excuses. External praise may feel powerful, but it is temporary. Internal respect is permanent. You don't wake up strong because someone clapped for you yesterday. You wake up strong because you know who you are today. When your worth comes from inside, rejection no longer feels like destruction. It feels like redirection. Criticism no longer feels like an attack. It feels like information. And success no longer feels like proof. It feels like alignment. Think about how dangerous it is to let strangers define your value. They don't know your battles. They don't see your discipline, your growth, your quiet victories. They only see moments, not the journey. Yet so many people hand them the power to decide whether they feel good about themselves. That's like letting someone else hold the mirror you use to see your soul. When your worth is external, you become a performer instead of a creator. You act instead of choose. You adapt instead of lead. But when your worth is internal, you become grounded. You don't need to prove yourself. You need to express yourself. You don't need to impress. You need to progress. The strongest shift you can make in life is moving from, do they approve of me, to, do I approve of myself? That question changes everything. It changes how you work, how you love, and how you walk away from what no longer serves you. It gives you the power to set standards instead of chasing acceptance. It teaches you to value your time, your energy, and your vision. And when you live from that place, you don't fear being misunderstood because you understand yourself. You don't fear being rejected because you have already accepted who you are. Your worth becomes a foundation, not a negotiation. It is no longer something people can give you or take away. It is something you carry with you, unshaken by opinion and untouched by comparison. And from that space, you don't just survive in the world, you stand in it fully, boldly, and unapologetically. People pleasing often looks like kindness on the surface, but underneath, it is usually fear in disguise. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. So you say yes when your heart is screaming no. You agree when you feel uncomfortable. You stay silent when something matters to you. Over time, this pattern becomes normal, and you start believing that keeping everyone else happy is your responsibility. But every time you betray your own needs to protect someone else's comfort, you send yourself a powerful message. My feelings don't matter. That is not generosity. That is self-abandonment. When you constantly please others, you train them how to treat you. You teach them that your time is flexible, your boundaries are weak, and your energy is always available. And the more you do it, the more exhausted you become. Resentment builds quietly. You smile on the outside while frustration grows on the inside. You wonder why people don't respect you, but respect begins with how you respect yourself. If you don't protect your own limits, the world won't do it for you. People-pleasing is not a strategy for love. It is a strategy for survival. It comes from the belief that if you are useful enough, nice enough, or agreeable enough, you will be safe. But safety built on silence is fragile, and connection built on pretending is empty. The cost of people-pleasing is your identity. You lose touch with what you actually want because you are too busy responding to what others expect. Your opinions soften, your dreams shrink, your voice becomes quieter, and eventually, you don't know where you end and where everyone else begins. That's why so many people feel invisible in their own lives. They are present everywhere except within themselves. They show up for everyone except their own future. And the tragedy is they believe they are being selfless when in reality they are slowly disappearing. Here is the shift that changes everything. Saying no is not an attack. It is an act of honesty. It is not rejection. It is direction. When you say no to what drains you, you say yes to what grows you. When you stop managing other people's emotions, you start managing your own life. Discomfort will come at first. Your voice will shake. Guilt will try to pull you back into old habits. But that discomfort is a signal that you are choosing yourself for the first time. And that choice builds strength. It builds clarity. It builds self-trust. People who truly care about you will adjust. They may be surprised, but they will respect you. The ones who only benefited from your silence may resist, but that resistance reveals the truth of the relationship. You were never meant to be liked by everyone. You were meant to be aligned with yourself. When you stop pleasing and start leading your own life, something powerful happens. You become consistent instead of conflicted, peaceful instead of pressured, confident instead of controlled. You no longer live to avoid disappointment. You live to honor your values. And in that space, you don't lose people. You lose roles that never belong to you. You gain something far greater, the right to live without apologizing for existing. Boundaries are not walls. They are definitions. They define where you end and where others begin. Yet so many people confuse boundaries with selfishness because they were taught that being good means being available, agreeable, and endlessly giving. But without boundaries, giving turns into draining and kindness turns into resentment. When you don't protect your time, your energy, and your values, you send a message that they are negotiable. And the world will negotiate them down to nothing if you let it. Boundaries are not about controlling others. They are about honoring yourself. They are the visible proof that you believe your life has value. Every healthy relationship runs on clarity. When you set boundaries, you make your standards clear. You teach people how to treat you. You show them what is acceptable and what is not. Without that clarity, relationships become confusing and exhausting. You feel taken for granted, misunderstood, or overwhelmed, but the real issue is that you never drew the line. A boundary is not an argument, it is an agreement with yourself. It is the moment you decide, this is what I allow, and this is what I don't. And that decision changes how you walk, how you speak, and how you show up in the world. Most people avoid boundaries because they fear conflict. They think setting limits will push people away. But the opposite is usually true. Boundaries attract respect. They create safety. They make relationships more honest because they remove the guesswork. When you don't have boundaries, you say yes while feeling no. You stay quiet while feeling angry. You give while feeling empty. That emotional contradiction builds pressure, and pressure eventually explodes. Boundaries release that pressure early. They stop problems before they become pain. They turn silent frustration into clear communication. And clarity is a form of love, both for yourself and for others. Setting boundaries will feel uncomfortable at first. You will feel guilty. You will worry about how you sound. You will replay conversations in your head. That discomfort does not mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are doing something new. You are breaking a pattern of self-neglect and replacing it with self-respect. Boundaries are the training ground of confidence. Each time you speak your limit, you strengthen your identity. Each time you protect your space, you deepen your trust in yourself. Over time, what felt hard becomes natural, what felt selfish becomes normal, and what felt scary becomes empowering. When you respect your own boundaries, you stop living in reaction to other people's demands and start living in alignment with your own priorities. You choose where your energy goes instead of having it taken from you. You invest in what matters instead of being scattered across what doesn't. And that creates a powerful shift in your life. You become more focused, more peaceful, and more grounded. People don't walk over someone who knows where they stand. They don't take advantage of someone who knows their worth. Boundaries turn your inner values into outer behavior. They make self-respect visible. The truth is, boundaries are not barriers to connection. They are the foundation of it. They allow you to give without losing yourself, to love without shrinking, and to help without breaking. When you build your life with boundaries, you don't close your heart, you protect it. You don't harden, you become clearer. And in that clarity, you stop surviving on approval and start standing on principle. Boundaries are not something you use against others. They are something you use for yourself. They are the daily reminder that your time matters, your energy matters, and your life deserves to be lived with intention, not exhaustion. Discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a signal that something is changing. The moment you stop seeking validation and start standing in your own truth, your nervous system will react. You will feel awkward, uncertain, and exposed. That's because your mind has been trained to feel safe when others approve of you. Approval became your comfort zone. So when you step outside of it, even in the direction of freedom, your body reads it as danger. But growth has never lived inside comfort. Growth lives in the space where your old identity starts to break and a stronger one begins to form. Most people misunderstand discomfort. They think it means failure, so they turn back. They assume if something feels hard, it must be wrong. But the truth is, discomfort is the price of expansion. Every new level of confidence, every new standard, every new boundary will challenge the version of you that learned to survive by pleasing others. When you stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, is this true to me? Your inner world shifts. That shift creates tension because your habits and your values are no longer aligned. And tension is not your enemy. Tension is the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. If you avoid discomfort, you avoid growth. You stay in patterns that feel familiar even when they are painful. You repeat conversations you have outgrown. You stay in roles that no longer fit. You keep shrinking so that others can stay comfortable. But comfort without meaning leads to stagnation. It creates a quiet kind of suffering where nothing is wrong on the surface, but nothing feels right inside. Discomfort, on the other hand, is honest. It tells you that you are challenging an old belief, testing a new behavior, and stepping into unknown territory. And the unknown is where strength is built. The first time you say no when you used to say yes, it will feel heavy. The first time you speak your truth instead of staying silent, your heart will race. The first time you choose yourself instead of approval, guilt will show up. That does not mean you are selfish. It means you are rewiring your identity. You are teaching your system that safety does not come from being liked. It comes from being aligned. Over time, what once felt uncomfortable becomes normal. What once felt risky becomes routine. And what once felt impossible becomes part of who you are. Discomfort is also a test. It asks you a simple question. Will you return to what is familiar, or will you move toward what is true? One path keeps you accepted but empty. The other may feel lonely at first, but it leads to self-respect. And self-respect changes how you walk into a room, how you speak in relationships, and how you make decisions when no one is watching. You stop negotiating with your values. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop apologizing for your needs, not because you are cold, but because you are clear. Every breakthrough you admire in others came through a season of discomfort. Confidence was born in moments of doubt. Independence was built in moments of fear. Strength was developed in moments of resistance. So when discomfort shows up, don't label it as a problem. Recognize it as evidence that you are no longer living on autopilot. You are choosing consciously. You are stepping into responsibility for your own worth. And that choice will never feel easy at first, but it will always feel right in the long run. Discomfort is not here to stop you. It is here to shape you. Freedom begins the moment you stop asking the world who you are and start answering that question for yourself. When your approval comes from the outside, your emotions are always on trial. You rise when you are praised and fall when you are ignored. You feel powerful when you are accepted and small when you are questioned. That is not freedom. That is dependency. True freedom is not the absence of criticism. It is the absence of the need for it to define you. When you approve of yourself, you take back authorship of your life. You no longer wait for permission to feel confident, capable, or worthy. You decide. Self-approval changes the way rejection feels. Instead of seeing it as proof that something is wrong with you, you begin to see it as evidence that you are not meant to fit everywhere. You stop interpreting every no as a verdict on your value and start seeing it as information about direction. When you rely on your own standards, you are no longer shattered by disapproval because you are anchored in something deeper than opinion. You become selective instead of desperate. You listen without collapsing. You consider without surrendering. That is emotional independence. Criticism also loses its grip when you approve of yourself. Not because you ignore feedback, but because you are no longer controlled by it. You can separate useful insight from emotional noise. You can grow without being humiliated. You can improve without feeling small. When your worth is internal, feedback becomes a tool, not a weapon. You don't defend your ego, you develop your character. And that shift creates power, power to learn, power to adapt, power to move forward without dragging shame behind you. Self-approval also transforms your decisions. You stop choosing what is popular and start choosing what is right for you. You stop chasing what looks good and start building what feels true. You stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. That doesn't mean you become careless or isolated. It means you become intentional. Your yes means something because your no exists. Your presence has weight because it is not forced. Your voice is clarity because it is not borrowed. You are no longer living on emotional loans from other people's opinions. You are living on your own foundation. There is a quiet strength that comes from self-approval. It does not need to announce itself. It does not compete for attention. It does not beg for recognition. It stands calmly in its own identity. When you reach that place, comparison fades. You stop measuring your life against someone else's timeline. You stop proving and start building. You stop performing and start creating. And in that space, something remarkable happens. Peace replaces pressure. You are no longer trying to be enough. You are becoming who you are. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. Freedom is not being immune to pain. Freedom is being able to face rejection without losing yourself. It is being able to hear criticism without shrinking. It is being able to walk alone without feeling abandoned. When you approve of yourself, you are no longer controlled by the crowd. You are guided by your conscience. You don't need everyone to understand you because you understand yourself. And that understanding becomes your anchor in a world that constantly tries to define you. When self-approval becomes your home, the outside world stops being your judge and starts being your classroom. Every experience teaches instead of wounds. Every challenge shapes instead of breaks. You are no longer living in reaction to other people's expectations. You are living in response to your own values. And that is the deepest form of freedom. There is not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom to stand inside it without losing who you are.